Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band podcast. I'm your host, Benedict Hein. And if you're new to the show, welcome. So stoked you're joining us, you're hanging out with us today. If you are already a listener, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. We really appreciate you. Thank you for listening. Today is all about mastering and loudness. So we're going to talk about how loud do my songs actually need to be. And we got a very interesting question that I got on Instagram. And this question was all about like LUFS versus RMS, like average volume, loudness, these types of numbers and ways to measure that. And we're going to talk about whether or not any of that actually matters, what we think about it, what you need to know, and what you can like basically ignore, because some of that stuff might not be as important as you think. So we're going to talk all about that and have a mastering conversation. And as always, I'm here with Malcolm Owen Flood, my friend and co-host. Hello.
Hello, Benny. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great as well, man. Yeah, I'm excited about this topic. And you said a mastering conversation, but I would argue this is very relevant for our mixers and for our artists as well. For anybody that is not doing their own mixing or mastering, because actually, I would say that the people that ask me about this the most are the people that aren't doing those things. They're the artists that have paid for somebody to mix and master their song. They're confused. So
you're actually right.
Having a conversation. So it's public knowledge for all.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Because then, you're totally right. When I master for people, I often get, why is that so loud? Can I have a quieter version because somebody said it should be at minus 14 LUFS or something?
Exactly.
Or the opposite, like, why is that so quiet? Everything I listen to is louder. And they think that there's sort of a standard that, and so, yeah, you're totally right. It's actually relevant for people who don't do their mastering as well. Anyway, we're going to talk about this. And Malcolm, we can't skip the banter. I'm very sorry, but we have to talk about something else first. I wanted to just dive into the show now, because usually at this point we do that. But now, since we rearranged things in the beginning and sort of started with the topics so that people don't have to wait as long, I kind of forget that we still should talk about other stuff too. So what did you do this weekend? I can't start an episode without catching up with you.
I didn't get up to much, honestly, man. I had like the chillest weekend ever. The people that have listened to any episodes lately are probably aware that I've got a YouTube channel going, and I've been like going so hard on that. It's just like all consuming. That's my personality type. I get into something and then I like overdo it.
Like wildlife photography.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm just like, this is me now. My identity is a wildlife photographer and a YouTuber. And I like that about myself, because I feel like I develop skills really quickly because of that, but it's really easy to burn out on it and lose interest. So I forced myself to take a break from all of it, and I didn't take a photo, and I didn't film a video or even open my like edits or anything for YouTube all weekend, and just was like, all right, I'm on break. So hung out with my brother, took it chill. Had a family dinner last night. It was really nice, but I'm like itching to do some more filming after this podcast here.
Well, that sounds like a plan, and like this is good for you that you got to take this break early, basically, because sometimes we notice it when it's way too late, and then it's very hard to stop or like make yourself stop. So take those breaks, man.
Yeah, it's hard to stop, but it's also like what I'm afraid of is getting back. Because I heard recently, I can't remember the percentage, so I'm not even going to try, but a certain percentage of people that burn out never return to what they burnt out from. And like, I'm talking true burnout, where you're like, I think some people listening to this will know what I'm talking about. But like, I don't want that. I love doing this. So it's like, you got to respect your passions and give them the space they need at times.
Yes, 100%. But that sounds like a fun weekend, though. And we got to push your YouTube channel more often, because it's really, really cool.
It's my name, guys. Just go find Malcolm Owen Flood on YouTube. You'll find me there.
Absolutely, for sure. Do that.
Yeah. What did you do, Benny?
It was a mixed thing. So what did I do? We visited some friends on Saturday, so that was chill. We visited my mom yesterday. That was also cool, but also a couple of annoying things too. I had some repair work at home to do, and sometimes I enjoy that stuff, but some things I just hate. And in this case, it was like I should have just hired someone to do that and not try it myself. Like, it was just so frustrating.
I think we're similar in that.
I don't know. Yeah, probably.
I actually, speaking of burnout, I wanted to call you out on something, Benny. Because you sent me a message. You've sent me some, I'll call digital assets that I needed for helping with this podcast and our educational platforms. And I was like, sweet. But then I was like, wait, what time is it in Germany right now? And I looked, and it was like 1 a.m. or something crazy. It was very late. And I was like, Benny, what are you doing, man? You can't be working right now.
Yeah, you're right. But sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. But yeah, you're totally right. I shouldn't be doing that. But that's just who I am sometimes. As you said, like if I do something, I won't stop until it's done. And then
you get very excited about it. Yeah,
exactly.
And, I could tell from the email that you had like figured out the most optimal, efficient way to handle the problem we were figuring out. And I was like, man, you're a beast.
Dude, I love that stuff so much. I'm such a nerd when it comes to that. I love spreadsheets and mapping out sort of, like these are things that are completely irrelevant to our audience, but like the stuff that goes on behind the scenes of a business, especially an online business, that sort of stuff. I love that. It's like a strategy game almost a little bit, and it's like building something cool and then figuring out problems, and then when it works, I get all excited. And
yeah, and you're really good at planning for future problems, I think. So you're like, I'm going to figure it out so good that it's going to eliminate what would have been a problem in the future.
I'm trying.
Awesome.
I'm trying. Yeah,
it's hard. Yeah. It's hard to predict the future. But honestly, I feel like listeners, if you are looking for value from this crazy banter, it's the amount of forethought that goes into ideas for the self-recording platform, self-recording band platform, that like apply that to your band. There's you can think ahead beyond just whatever is on your mind that week, and you'll benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, and then actually I did one music-related thing also, that's not like my job, but for my band. You remember the Dark Glass Microtubes Infinity thing that we talked about on the last episode?
Absolutely.
I ordered that because I wanted it.
Cool.
And now I want to try it for my band and for my sound because I really like it. I tried it and it's awesome, and now I want to do that. And then also I ordered like a couple of things to get a bass that I haven't used in a while. I want to get that back in shape and try it and swap out my current setup. So I just ordered a bunch of music gear, which is always fun.
Oh, very fun, very fun. So did you get that pedal, or is it on its way?
It's on its way. I just ordered it this weekend. I did a bunch of research, and then again, the way I am is like I didn't just order the pedal. I thought about, well, then I have my tuner and that pedal, and I don't like cables in front of me, and I will accidentally step on it and like move things. And so I got a little tiny pedal board and a way to organize the cables. It's just two things, but still I want to have it organized and neat, and I wanted a bag for it so that I can get it to the gigs and like all these things. So I spent a little time researching that and got it all together. And as soon as it arrives, we'll set it all up.
Very cool. I'm excited to hear how you like it. I've been thinking about guitar gear a lot lately as well. My latest video was on if I should sell my Kemper because it's like literally collecting dust, which is something I never thought I'd say with how much I actually love that tool. But like I'm just not using it, and I'm like, what should I get? Is there a like smaller, more like, because I don't play live professionally anymore, so do I need a Kemper? Is there like a dad rock version, so looking into what other options are out there since I bought my Kemper, and surprisingly there isn't as many things as I thought that like play at that level. There's like the neural solutions, which are amazing. The AxeFX stuff is also really cool. But as far as like a step down from pro touring grade, not a lot of things that I was impressed with so far, but it's got to be coming.
It's true. Have you tried the Helix stuff?
Okay, I did, and I really didn't like it, but I think I may have made a mistake on that test. What we did is my band was touring, and I had my Kemper, and we were like, this is amazing, and we're not packing around an extra giant cab or amplifier. We just have this little thing, and our stage volume problem is significantly better as well. So I was trying to convince Sam, the singer and guitarist in Band of Rascals, the other guitarist, to get one as well. And so what we did is, we decided we should have a spare amp on the road, because if mine or his breaks, having a spare is a really good idea. And so we just rented a Helix for that tour as the spare amp. And then I played around with it while we were driving around in the RV between shows. And I didn't like how it sounded, but thinking back to it, it was all through the built-in headphone amp. And maybe that's just garbage, you know? So I never got to plug it into like my studio mains. I never got to plug it into like an FR speaker. So I don't think I really gave it justice, like a real test kind of thing.
Okay.
But
yeah,
that headphone amp sounded terrible.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, interesting, because I thought that I was pretty impressed by it, and I went in, I always didn't want it to sound good, or I assumed it didn't sound great just because it's Line 6. And at that point that I tried it, like Line 6 was not particularly known for like super good sounding digital amps. And they've made great stuff before, but you know, they get a bad rap and they have some crappy amps. They have some great amp sims if you compare it with the right IRs and stuff. But you know, I didn't expect a lot of it. And then I tried it and I was kind of blown away, honestly. And I really, really like it. So might have been the headphone amp. I don't know. I really enjoyed it.
It might have been. And I will say that I liked the user interface quite a bit. I thought that was actually pretty cool. And the effects, cool. Their delays are really fun always.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that is the way I should go. But
yeah, maybe try it. Yeah, the Cortex, the quad Cortex is obviously amazing, but also not really cheap. So
yeah, that's the one I want, but it's like it's way overkill.
Yeah, totally. Honestly, if it's just for playing at home, I would probably just get an amp sim and plug into my laptop or something, you know, if it's just for myself.
That is the, like, we're essentially having my video as a podcast now all of a sudden. But like that 99% of the time, that's all I need. So like plugging in and using one of my Neural DSP plugins. And I still haven't tried that plugin you got me to buy last week, by the way, that Audio Assault one. But like though that checks all the boxes for me. Totally happy with that. But I'm not going to sell my Kemper and not have something around in case, like, you know, like my buddy wants to jam and, you know, I need an amp for actually playing in a room with somebody in that case, right?
Does it have to be digital?
Not necessarily, but I am a believer.
Yeah, totally. Now, I'm just saying because there is one amp that I was also so surprised. It's like, it's not you anymore, not at all, but it's one of the newer Marshalls though, but it's still, I don't know, 15 years old or something, I don't know. But there's the JVM, there's a 50 watts and the 100 watts version.
Yeah, I've seen those for sure.
And I was so surprised when I heard that, because it has kind of, it's all analog, but it has all the different types of Marshall circuits in it. You can have an 800, a 2000, a 900, a JMP, a Plexi. All that stuff is built into one amp basically. And then like it's, I don't know, 8 channels or something crazy like that. And I was really surprised by how great that thing sounds. And it also has an output with like a DI XLR output with a speaker simulation or something on it, or at least a filter or something. So it is a tube amp, but you can use it at home. You can use it without a cab, and it sounds pretty decent.
That's pretty cool. But would I sell my Kemper to get it? Probably not.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I'm stuck with the Kemper until like a new thing comes around that is like... essentially, I just need Kemper to make something with a better user interface and smaller, I think.
All right. Cool.
We have really gone into the guitar rabbit hole.
Exactly. So that was today's episode. I'd say like this is an episode in and of itself. No, we wanted to talk about loudness. So
Loudness.
I think I'm going to start by reading out that question now. So that question comes from, and please, sorry if I butcher your name now, Taylor. I think it's Taylor Volts. Anyway, Taylor, sorry if I got that wrong. But Taylor sent me a message on Instagram, and he was saying, I was a professional audio engineer from 2008 until around 2015, until I got burnt out. There you have it, burnout. About a year ago, I rediscovered the joy of making music, but obviously a lot has changed. Back then, RMS was king with loudness, and these days it seems to be outdated, and LUFS, LUFS, is the new standard. I don't really understand why LUFS is more popular than RMS. Do you still use RMS, or should I abandon it? That was his question. And his productions, he sent over a link, and I know a band that he's working with, and he knows what he's doing. So Taylor is not a beginner. He's a true professional. He makes awesome sounding stuff. So he knows what he's talking about. And I found that to be even more interesting because that just goes to show that you can make amazing work without really diving deep into these types of numbers and things, So I just want to say that so that people know that Taylor is not a beginner. He's really pro. But yeah, I think it's a good question. I found it interesting that he asked that.
It's a great question. And yeah, I think anybody that's released music has probably come across like some kind of YouTube video warning them about not getting their LUFS wrong or their song's going to sound terrible, yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of kind of like fear-based content out there that seems to be built around scaring musicians on releasing their music at a certain volume, which is fascinating.
Totally.
So it's definitely a good question. Not surprised we got it, and happy to dig into it.
Should we start by, maybe we should say what loudness actually is, because we assume that people know it, but maybe not everybody's aware of what that actually means. So RMS and LUFS are ways to measure loudness, and loudness means not like peak volume, not the number you get when you measure with a sound pressure meter. When you measure how loud something is, you get a sound pressure, but that's not the loudness. That's just the peak sound pressure, the peak volume. And loudness is an average volume measured over a short period of time, and this is how loud we perceive something. So it's not a short burst of something loud, but it's like how loud does the song or the signal sound to us. And the funny thing is, if you measure sound pressure, if you have two different sources and one sounds clearly louder than the other, it doesn't mean that it also measures louder on a sound pressure meter, but it can be that the loudness is higher because it's more dense, it's less dynamic, and you perceive it as louder. So loudness is an average. And in your DAW, if you look at the channel meters, depending on your setup and everything, but it could be RMS or peak, but typically you see peak values. And this doesn't tell you much about the loudness, about how loud it feels or how you perceive it. It tells you something about the maximum volume of the signal. But again, a signal that has a low value there on the peak meter can be louder or sound louder than another signal that peaks higher because the average loudness is higher of the first one. So and we measure that there's different ways to measure that, and RMS and LUFS are two different ways to do that. RMS stands for root mean square, and it's the average level of your audio signal measured over a longer period of time and close to what our ears perceive as the loudness of our audio. LUFS, however, stands for loudness units relative to full scale. This is what LUFS stands for, LUFS. And this is a loudness standard designed to enable the matching of perceived audio levels so that different signals or songs will sound equally loud no matter what the dB meter says. So loudness units, LU, is a unit that describes loudness by taking into account how our hearing perceives volume and not just pure sound pressure or amplitude like dB does. Right? And again, FS means relative to full scale. So for example, minus 18 LUFS means 18 LU loudness units away from the maximum of 0. And the difference between, say, minus 23 LUFS and minus 18 LUFS, for example, is 5 LU loudness units. LUFS is based on RMS. It's like very similar. So it's also similar readings, actually, with the difference that it takes into account our hearing, which means it's like frequency dependent. RMS is just the sheer level average, basically, and LUFS takes into account our frequency dependent perception of volume. And so it's closer to how we perceive loudness. But if you compare the two, it's actually not far off. It's pretty similar. But a song with a lot of low end can measure differently from a song with a lot of top end and less low end, for example. So
our ears just perceive those sounds and frequencies different, so that it's going to yield a different result.
So does that matter? Do you need to know all that stuff?
So I think you don't need to know all that. It's fun to know, and I think by learning that, it's going to help you with this conversation Benny and I are going to have to kind of understand enough to be able to forget about it. It's like you can like understand it and be like, okay, now I get it, and I can stop thinking about that forever. It is kind of what I think, but I'm curious if we're going to have the exact same opinion on this. I don't think it really matters if we do, but it's fascinating. So just to summarize there, though, RMS and LUFS, or LUFS, we call them, there are two ways of measuring the loudness of your audio, and LUFS have become pretty popular over the last few years because they are seemingly more accurate. Because it's based on how our ears would perceive the frequencies. I think we'll dig into why I, and maybe you, Benny, don't really think it's that important for you to be tracking it either.
Yeah, totally. So my opinion is there is a reason for why LUFS is there, and it makes sense that it is there because the thing that I just said, it was just something I read. By the way, what I just read there, the definition of LUFS and RMS, that can be found on our website. If you go to the selfrecordingband.com/audio terms, I haven't said that much on the podcast, but I have a whole huge resource, which are blog posts that are connected together, where I explain all kinds of different audio terms and definitions and things that people keep asking me about. So it's a huge collection, like a glossary or something of these things. So if you go to the selfrecordingband.com/audio terms, and then you scroll down and you find general audio terms, production process, routing and processing, microphones, preamps, converters, interfaces, cables, connectors, etc. And if you click on any of those categories, it spits out a list of terms with the definition below it. And RMS and LUFS are on that list too. And I just read that out there. So I just basically did research and copied and pasted the definitions and put my own thoughts to it and all of that. So I think what I just said in that definition for loudness units and LUFS is it's there so we can compare two different songs and make sure that when they're on a playlist together, that it makes sense, that one is not way louder than the other, basically. Because with RMS, you can do that too, but it might be slightly off because our hearing doesn't work that way. We have the frequency thing. And with LUFS, we can get closer to that, and it makes it easier to be okay, we're going to master this compilation or this playlist or whatever. And if we make everything an average of, I don't know, XY, LUFS, then everything will be perceived about the same loudness, sort of. Or we can, streaming services use this to apply loudness normalization so that on Spotify, whatever you play, regardless if it's from the 80s or from the 2000s or whatever, it's going to be about equally as loud. And so, that's why it's useful, because it's more accurate than RMS. But honestly, from a practical standpoint, I don't really care because I'm not mixing or mastering for any of those targets. I just make it as loud as I think it should be for it to sound good. And if that is quiet, I will just stop and don't care. And if it's crazy loud, I'm also happy. I just give the song the density, the impact, and the compression, the volume, and all of that I think it needs, regardless of how loud other stuff is. So I really don't think about that stuff. Spotify is going to normalize anyway. And even if it's not normalized, even studies have shown that it doesn't really matter because people just use their volume knob and adjust. And it doesn't, nobody has ever sold a single record more just because of some LUFS value. It's just not a thing. Studies have shown that people don't prefer louder music, but they also don't prefer quieter music. So it just doesn't matter to me. All that matters is that when you turn it up loud, you don't make it worse sonically, or do it intentionally. It's all about intention, right? And if I lose impact because of loudness, I won't do it unless somebody specifically asks me to do it. But then maybe I'll do it. Yeah, but sometimes it just needs to be loud, and sometimes it needs to be distorted or even clipping a little, and that's what it needs. So I don't really care. On the other hand, though, RMS has a practical application. Sorry, I just wanted to finish the thing. RMS has a practical application for me because I still, and you, Taylor, I assume you did that too, or still do that. I still use a VU meter, a plug-in VU meter on my mix bus that is calibrated to where 0 on the VU meter is -18 RMS. And I use that for my gain staging process because I know that if I have any sort of analog mix bus compressor emulation, or if I run out of the computer into my actual analog mix bus, or if I have the same is true for buses or channels as well. I just use it as a gain staging thing because most of those analog boxes and their emulations are calibrated to -18 or -16 or -20 or something like that. And I just want to know that I'm hitting these boxes at their sweet spot, and I can intentionally go louder or quieter, but it just helps me know that I hit it about right. And this is just a good, a best practice thing. And there I just use good old RMS and the VU meter that's calibrated to a certain value. So from a practical level, I still use RMS and I don't care about LUFS.
That's a great application for sure. That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, totally. I look at it at the end, though, at the LUFS, just because I want to know. I look at my limiter, what it tells me and how loud it is, because I want to know. But honestly, I wouldn't even have to do that. I just, also my monitoring is calibrated. So calibrated means it's just set to one setting that's always the same. So, and I know it so well that I can just tell if it's loud or not. I can tell when I'm mastering. I wouldn't even have to look at the LUFS thing, because I know immediately if this is a quiet or a loud master, and that's all I need.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So going back to what I mentioned earlier, in that might call it misinformation about LUFS out there, is that people seem to think that if you release it too loud, like you've got too low of a LUFS number, meaning like, which is kind of high. Like, say you've mastered your song to -3 LUFS, which is insanely loud.
Yeah.
It's going to be like penalized when you throw it onto YouTube or Spotify or something. It's going to get turned down to get closer to their app, like their preferred LUFS kind of thing. Yes, it would get turned down, but it doesn't matter. is the reality, because it's like the quiet songs are getting turned up, the loud songs are getting turned down. Like it's all getting averaged to a LUF value anyways. So you don't really need to worry about that. What you need to worry about is just how your song sounds. Does it sound as loud on its own as you would like? And that comes down to what Benny was saying. Like, is it like sometimes things need to be crunchy, clipped, or like really dense? And those are kind of characteristics of a very loud master and mix. So it's all about just making it sound the way you want. And then you can absolutely and maybe should, if you're new to it, like compare against other songs in your genre to make sure that you're in a ballpark that is kind of like where the general loudness of that genre is, you know? So if you're in a like very loud rock genre and you make a mix that is -20 LUFS, which is not loud at all, your mix is probably going to sound really overly dynamic compared to those other mixes in that genre. What I just said makes sense, but would never happen, because you would know your mix sounds totally weird. It would sound really weird. You wouldn't be happy with your mix and then check and be at -20 LUFS if you're doing a dense rock mix, right? It's just not going to happen. So how I do it is I just mix. I make it as loud as I want. And then I always do check the LUFS, but it is purely for curiosity, essentially. I'm like, oh, where did I land? And sometimes I'm surprised by that number. I'm like, oh, that's actually louder than I thought it would be. I probably will not change anything because of that reaction. It's very unlikely that it's going to impact my decision. The only thing I have been using it for is actually YouTube, because I've been doing a mix for my YouTube video and then checking where it's at. And sometimes it's louder than it needs to be. And I'm like, oh, I can actually back that off and still be plenty loud. And I don't need my voice to be crunchy.
Yes, that's
right?
That's a good one.
Yeah. So it's like, why wouldn't I back it off? Because it's just dialogue, right? But with music, it's just like all about just making the mix and song sound as good as I want. And then I mentioned that I always check it, and it's not very impactful. I will mention that when I'm mixing a collection of songs, like for an EP, I'm glancing at that to make sure that that mix ended up in the same loudness sweet spot as the other songs on that release. They should be kind of in the same ballpark, you know? So that's maybe another practical use, is keeping a collection of things together and some unity in their apparent loudness. But really, you just got to worry about making the song sound how you want.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, you're totally right. The voice thing makes sense. I do it there too, just to know that, yeah, it's enough, basically. Yeah. And then it might make sense whenever I think it's really handy when, say you're mastering, I don't know, a compilation or something, as you said, like in context with other songs. It's very easy to just compare, to just make the DAW show you the LUFS values of those songs, and then adjust real quick, and then you get to an average sort of loudness across the record that just works. It's easy to mix and match different songs from different mastering engineers of different eras even, and just make them sound about the same, volume wise. So for that, it's better than RMS, I think, because it's more accurate. But for individual songs, yeah, again, we don't really care, I think. Now,
yeah, but even in that situation, we're still going to be listening to those other songs, right? Like our ears are still going to tell us that, hey, this sounds quieter. If it sounds quieter, that means that the LUFS value is probably lower, right?
Yes, totally. So, and I don't really know why that is still a thing and why people still recommend these weird like numbers and people think they should aim for that, because it never made sense to me musically, and it still doesn't. I know that some of those people who recommend this in their blogs and podcasts and YouTube and stuff, they know what they're doing, of course, and they know what they're talking about, and their masters might also sound great, and they will likely also make louder masters if it is what it takes. I think their intention is actually good, so they want to avoid people destroying their masters by going too loud and losing the impact and all of that. But you always have to add that you're absolutely allowed to make it louder if it's not getting worse. So that is always the other side of it. So yes, be careful. And yes, minus 14 might be enough, but it might also not be enough in some genres. And so you can always go louder. That's the thing. And as you said, being turned down on Spotify is not a problem at all. And to this day, people say the loudness wars are over because of over because of like volume, loudness normalization and that sort of stuff. But to this day, most of the masters that I listen to, most of the music that I listen to, if I like download the high-res version, import it into my DAW and measure it, or if I measure the stream from Spotify, sometimes it's like 3 or 4 dBs of dynamic, and that's it, like that dynamic range. Like it's still smashed and squashed and loud and all of that, most of it actually. So I don't know if it's over. And I don't even think that is a war at this point anymore. It's not about being the loudest. It's just about making a crazy impactful, super dense, modern sounding master. And some genres just need that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's so I think the intention of the people that were originally suggesting like negative 14 LUFS for Spotify, I think is the number, right? They came from the loudness wars at its peak, where people were making things loud just because they thought they had to make it competitive and at the expense of the mix, right? But now what we're saying is there's no need to do that. So you can make it as loud as you want if it suits the mix, but you can also make it really as quiet as you want too. It goes both ways. So you don't have to be afraid of going loud, but you don't have to go loud either, right? It's like either situation is going to work out fine as long as the mix is what you want. So it is like good information that like, hey, yeah, your mix can be negative 14 and sound great, and Spotify's going to think not mess with it. That's awesome. But like, I haven't mixed a rock song that would sound good at negative 14 ever.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So I think the flip side is people that don't have the experience of mixing and mastering are like, oh God, I gotta, like, my mixes are way too loud. I gotta make them way quieter and somehow get them to negative 14. That's not the case at all.
No, exactly. And now back to your original question, Taylor. So I kind of switched. I still use RMS because of what I said, the calibration of the view meters and all of that. But on the master, I just switched to LUFS, and it wasn't even like an intentional thing or conscious. I just did it because the limiters just show LUFS now, and I just got used to it. And so I didn't even make an effort there or like had to learn anything new. I just got used to it, and it's pretty similar to RMS anyway. And now I just look at the LUFS number. So yeah, and I use it. And what I want to say is it's helpful sometimes not because I want to aim for a certain target, but for example, if I'm working on a very dense, loud rock song, which is what I do most of the time, and I apply the amount of limiting that I think is right for the song, and the amount of compression and all of that, and I think I'm done basically, and then I have a feeling that it's still a little quiet, but more limiting or more compression just makes things worse and crunchy or whatever. And then I look at the LUFS numbers and it confirms that, and I just see that I'm at minus 9 or 10 or something, where I feel like with the amount of limiting and everything, I should be louder than that. That sometimes happens, but that is important information for me because that tells me that something's wrong with my mix, probably with the balance or the frequency balance. Might be that I have way too much low end, and so I can't limit as hard or compress as hard without it becoming crunchy or weird. It might be that the song needs that, and that's fine, but it also might mean that just something is off with the balance. It might mean that my snare is 3 dB too loud, and so I can't really limit or compress as hard because the snare is just sticking out too much. So usually these numbers tell me things about the mix, and then I can go and fix it, and all of a sudden I can go way louder without it causing problems. Because the loudness is not only on the master, the loudness happens in the mix. It's a matter of balance and EQ decisions and all of that. And then at the end, it's just a touch of limiting, and I can get it crazy loud. But if I'm not able to do that, it's probably that I missed something before the mastering, actually.
Yeah. I think that's for Taylor's question. That's like the ideal answer that I would give too. For the rest of our audience who are self-recording bands who probably aren't mixing or mastering, do they need to worry about it?
No, I don't think so. As long as you hire someone, no, I don't think so. As long as you hire someone who knows what they're doing, like just trust the mastering engineer. If it's a good professional mastering engineer, they know all that stuff. That's all they do all day. And if they send you a master that sounds great and you agree that it sounds great, then don't even think about the volume. Just, be happy that it sounds great and put it out there. And you can always ask you can ask for a louder version or something if you want, but then they will probably explain to you why they made it that way. And then you can maybe compare a louder version. I don't know, you have to talk to your engineer, but I would, first and foremost, I would just trust them. And if you all that matters is that you agree that it sounds great. And if you do, and if it translates well to all kinds of listening systems, and it doesn't sound weak in comparison to other stuff you listen to, then just be happy and release it. And you don't even have to look at the numbers because they don't matter.
Yeah. Every once in a while, when I'm mastering, I'll spit out a loud and a slightly quieter version, like a more dynamic version, and just be like, "Hey, I really thought it sounded cool pushing this a little harder than is normal for this genre, but maybe I'm alone on that. So here's the other one. Just let me know what you think." And like, loudness is a creative decision at the end of the day. So it's like, you can experiment with that and find something that might just bring it more in line with your vision for what your sonic footprint is. Maybe you're meant to be loud. Maybe you're not meant to be loud. Maybe you're meant to be quite dynamic and stand out that way.
Yes, totally. 100%. By the way, if you want to just experiment with that and do it yourself, but you don't really know how to get it loud or how to do that without distortion, if you go to the selfrecordingband.com/master, it's MAASTR. That is a link that leads you to master.io, which is an AI mastering tool. There's different pricing tiers, but you can try it for free. And why I say that is if you go to that link, the selfrecordingband.com/master, you get, I think it's 10% off your first month or so. But you can try it for, we partnered with them, and so you get a discount if you go through our link. And if you try it for free, you can just really quickly compare 3 different loudness options. You can compare different color options of the master, but also different loudness options. And so you can just upload your mix or your demo, whatever you have, and compare the different volumes. And then you can make a decision if, what changes when it gets louder. Is it getting better or worse? Is it getting more dense? Does it feel differently? Is it really just volume? So you can do that. You can compare at equal volume, and you can play around with that a little bit. And that's an easy way to just get an idea of what loudness actually is, because all of those masters will peak at the same level basically, but they are not the same loudness. And you can then compare what that actually does to the sonics, to your song. So tools like that are a great way to just explore that. Or if you have Ozone or some of those tools, just play around with that a little bit and try and learn about the effects that it has. And I think more than anything, just trust your mastering engineer that they deliver something that just works and translates.
Yeah, you probably hired them for a reason.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
We got some points on here, like questions on here we were going to address, and I think we kind of did address most of these, like how important is this really? We addressed that we for our audience don't think it's important really at all. Should you aim for a specific target? Both of us seem to agree, no, you shouldn't. That's not necessary, other than maybe just making sure it's in the ballpark of other songs in your genre, if that's important to you. And then there's a couple questions on here that I'm curious, this is like the advanced nerd talk between Benny and I now. So it's not necessarily important, but I'm curious. One question is, how loud do we master? And then a question I wrote down is, do you use integrated, short-term, or momentary LUFS metering? So let's start with how loud do you master, Benny? Do you have, and what I mean by that, because we just talked about how it doesn't matter, it just suits the song, but I'm wondering if you have something that you kind of, like, your taste regularly lands on.
Yes, I think I can say that. It's like, again, not shooting for numbers, and it's a little different from song to song, but I'd say I land on between most of the louder.
Are you measuring with integrated or short-term or momentary LUFS?
Okay, so I'm measuring what's the default here? I'm sometimes switching between. It's actually a good question. See, that's how unimportant that is to me. In Cubase in Control Room, I switch between all three of those just because I want to know. But on the limiter, on the final limiter that I use, where I just look at it, it's short term.
Yeah, me too.
It's not momentary, but short term. So not super short, but also not long. So I use short term as I'm mixing and mastering. That makes most sense to me.
To quickly explain those modes to people, and this is not exact by any stretch, but integrated measures pretty much continuously. So if you listened to the whole song with integrated on, you would know the actual integrated LUFS of your entire song averaged out, where short term has like a short memory, essentially. I don't know what the length of that is, but it kind of is short enough that I can tell that, all right, this is kind of the average LUFS value of my chorus, the loud part of the song, right? And then at the verse, it's going to drop back down again. Where momentary is like instant, like it's going to change every snare hit. So it's not a lot of value in that, where short term is like, okay, I can tell that this part of the song is around this loud.
Yeah, so I don't really have a target, but for the loud stuff that I typically work on, I typically land between -6 and -8 or something. So pretty loud. Like if it gets really loud, I can be -5 point something sometimes, but usually if it says -6 point something, this is usually where I land. If it's a little more dynamic stuff, it can be -8. And I know this sounds crazy to some people because -6, 7, or 8 doesn't sound like dynamic stuff. But in our world, like the music that I mix, this is actually not super loud. If you deliver a modern metal or punk rock or hardcore or something like that mix, or even like indie stuff, at -8, this is not going to be super loud compared to other stuff. And then -6 or -7 is pretty much standard, I'd say. Sometimes it's even louder than that. And if it's really dynamic stuff, then it can be -10 or so, but this is very rare. So it's usually between -6 and 8. And the funny thing is, quieter things, like sometimes I have to turn down, like if there's a record with a couple of loud songs and then there's one acoustic song, I sometimes have to turn down that acoustic song quite a bit to make it work together with the rest of the record, because the acoustic song without transients, without drums and all of that might easily get up to like -5 or so without me doing anything, just because it's like it's like the static thing that doesn't have a lot of like short-term dynamics and stuff. And so I sometimes have to not even make it louder, but I have to turn it down because it will sound louder than the loud metal song in a weird way. So
yeah. Tricky. It is tricky. I've got the same answer. Yeah, I'm between -6 and -8 is kind of the average. I would say 7 is probably where I expect things to land. That's like normally like, all right, I bet it's around there. But yeah, up to again -5 as well is probably as heavy as I've pushed things. I'm sure I've hidden the 4 at some point, but that's really loud, I think.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Now, there's one thing I want to say that you have to be careful with, and this is, and I wasn't even aware of that really. I mean, I've read about it, but it didn't really matter to me. But not long ago, I was on a mastermind meeting with a couple of friends, like a mastermind group that we meet weekly, and we did a meeting in the real world, our first real life meeting, and we got together and we sat there, and then one of our people in the group, he said, like, we talked about loudness, about all this stuff, and then he was like, wait, how do you guys measure your RMS or LUFS values or whatever? And he used RMS still and not LUFS, and we were like, well, I use whatever RMS meter I have in my DAW. And then we discovered that some plugins, depending on the scale or the calibration they use, give you a 3 dB different RMS reading compared to others. So there is the AES 17 thing. If that is on or off, makes a 3 dB difference. And AES 17 is the standard. So most modern plugins that still have RMS reading, they give you the AES 17 standard. But then there are some, especially some older ones, and I think in his case it was a T-Rex limiter or something that has been around for a while, that doesn't use that AES 17 sort of measurement scale, whatever, and it's just off by 3 dBs. So he was like, my masters are crazy loud, and I'm always delivering at like -8. And I'm like, -8 is not that loud. And he was like, yeah, listen to this. Right. And I was like, yeah, that is loud. And we couldn't figure it out. And then we figured out that he was using a different RMS meter, and mine set -5 and his set -8.
So luckily, he's got ears and was entrusting them, right? And not being stressed out about it and trying to push it further because he thought he had to be louder, so that's great, but that's hilarious because I'm sure that has led to all sorts of misinformation out there and people having online forum fights about loudness because they're looking at different numbers that mean the same thing.
Yeah, that was our exact thoughts. Like, we were like, if that has been a thing for so long and we weren't aware of it, like, can you imagine how many people, like, they got into fights over this and they were meaning the exact same thing, but they were like 3 dB off and didn't even know, because nobody ever says AES.
Is that like the people that are going to be because you said it's probably older plugins that are showing this -3 number. Those are like the traditional, the people that have been doing this longer, older engineers. So like it's like this new age, young age butting of heads where they think we're all crazy for going so loud, but they're going just as loud as we are.
Yeah, that could totally be the case. And like, yeah, totally. And it is probably like that because nobody ever says like RMS and then they add AES 17. Yeah. People just say RMS. No. If you look online, people just say mine is at -8 RMS, period. And nobody knows what that actually means because apparently there's different RMS values. And so I'm just saying, use your ears and make it as loud as you think it's good for the song. And be aware that these are not the only ways to measure it. There's a couple of different ways to measure loudness and volume and different dB values and scales and metering tools and whatever. And so if you want to compare, make sure you compare it to the same thing. That's so important because there's all kinds of different ways to measure this and it's easy to get confused. So if you get into an argument about this or if you like compare things, then make sure you're talking about the same thing.
So what are the takeaways?
I think the takeaways are for Taylor, if you are used to RMS and your work sounds great, do what's been working for you and don't even worry about it. Yeah. If you want to know and learn about this, just use some LUFS meter, look at it every once in a while and just learn how it translates to your RMS and then you'll quickly figure it out. I think that you should do that so that you just know how loud it actually is and when it reads a certain number or something, just to get a feel for it. But I wouldn't master for any target. It's a useful comparison tool, but that's it basically. And yeah, your work is great no matter what. So
yeah, there we go. And for the rest of our audience, don't sweat it. Just be happy with how your song sounds, and as long as you're happy with how it sounds, you're good.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I have to add one thing because I know people are going to message us about this. There's still a reason for all these like standards and these measurement tools and the requirements for publishing or distribution and all of that. But it's not relevant for us in music as much because the exception, and that's where it really matters, the exception is like TV production, for example, broadcasting. There are certain standards where they just won't accept, the audio if it's not done to their standards. So there's TV standards, broadcast standards, but you don't have to worry about that even if you make music for TV. The person who has to worry about that is the final person that delivers it to the station, basically, or that does the final broadcast. They have to worry about it, but only they, because they have these standards, and they have to just, if you deliver a master at -5 and they get it, they will turn it down by 10 dB or something, or 20 or something.
Yeah.
These TV things are really quiet.
There's that maximum ceiling, but then there's the loudness range, like the dynamic range is sometimes really small as well. So everything's got to fit within this certain threshold. Yeah. Can be really tricky, but luckily as musicians, you don't got to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. But I just want to say there is, because people might be like, why do we have those things then? There is a reason, because there's professional industries where you have to worry about this, and there is a standard that you just have to know about. But in music, do whatever you want and make it sound good.
This is to stop people from blowing up your TVs and computer speakers with their ads being cranked too loud.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Very cool. Hope this was valuable. As always, if you got any value out of this, please share the podcast with your friends. Make a screenshot, post it on socials, tag Malcolm, Owen Flood, and Benedict Hein on Instagram, or the Self-Recording Band, or all of us. If we have any guests on the show, please tag them as well. Share it with your friends. Help us reach more people like you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, we love getting questions like this on Instagram too. It's great for us to know, okay, we should make an episode on this, because people are literally asking for it.
Exactly. All right. Taylor, if you got any follow-up questions, hit me up. Let me know. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye.